Now it's time to tackle the lining of the Miss Maggie bag. And as we did with the outer pieces, you need to cut out the 2-inch square corners on the lining pieces for the bottom. If you're using directional fabric, make sure that you do cut the correct ends. So, you know, you don't want it to cut it upside down and have the print the wrong way. So I've cut out the corners, and we're going to do the slip pocket, and we have a 10 by 10 inch piece of fabric, and you need to put it right sides together, and you'll see that I've used my jigsaw of interfacing, as I did on my previous videos where I use every single last scrap of interfacing, and do not waste anything. It works perfectly fine. So I've folded that in half, finger pressed it. You can pin it to stitch. I don't. You're going to stitch around a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving approximately 3-inch gap, and you need to double stitch each side so that you're locking the stitches in place. So you're stitching down there, stop, double stitch, down there, stop, double stitch, and then I shall come back. So I've sewn around the edges and leaving the gap. I do double stitch the corners as well. It just reinforces them, so when you turn the pocket the right side out and you're poking the corners, it helps stop the whatever you're using to poke the corners through, helps stop it going through and breaking the stitching. So it's just something that I prefer to do. And you need to cut across your corners, and I cut across diagonally, and then I also do this. It just reduces the bulk, so that you've not got, you know, so much bulk there when you're turning, and it will give you a much neater, sharper corner. And then I also do the same in the top parts, again just to give us that neater corner. And then we need to turn the pocket right side. Gently tease the corners out. I don't go in it like a bull in a china shop. You just want to gently push the corners. So you have a nice sharp corner, because you've trimmed the corners before you've turned. And now you want to iron the opening parts. You want to iron the seam in so it's a nice neat closure. So there's your closure, which you'll stitch closed as you attach it to the lining. If you want to use some double-sided tape to close it beforehand, you can, but you really don't need to. And now we want to place the slip pocket. Oh, no we don't. I forgot. We need to top stitch along the sealed edge, the folded edge, not the edge with the split, but the top edge. We just need to top stitch to give it a nice crisp edge. Okay, so I've top stitched along the top, and we need to get our ruler and mark 2 inches down from the top. Just trying to see the markings on my ruler. So 2 inches down. Now this pocket, my pocket, measures, oh I can't see the print. Just over 9 inches, just slightly over 9 inches, and it's 16 inches long, so we want just under 4 inches each side. So if I place that there and there, let's see, so that's 3 1/4 that side, and oh, slightly I think my maths is completely out. That's terrible. So 3 1/4 that side, and 3 1/2. So just nudge it back. So that's it. That's in place along the centre, and that's correct. That's exactly where it should be. And then when I locate my pins, which strangely enough they're exactly where they should be, which I'm not used to doing, is just pin the pocket in place. I just want to check everything is correct and it hasn't shifted at all. So that's 3 3/8 of an inch, and that's 3 3/8 of an inch, and that's where it should be. Lovely. I'm going to go and stitch now. You double stitch on each corner there, just so that you're not pulling on wear and tear, and make sure that you stitch over the gap. And the other thing I will do beforehand is mark the for the centre line. So as it's 9 1/4, I want to be just over the 4 1/2 inch mark. Stitching down there as well. So that's the slip pocket sewn. The gap has been stitched down, so there's no gap anymore. I've double stitched at each top, so that when you're putting things in and out, there's, you know, it's not going to come apart easily. Occasionally I do like to put rivets on the corners and at the centre point, because it again gives added strength. But I don't fancy doing it this time. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I'm not doing it this time. So that's that side piece done. Now they haven't done a zip pocket in the pattern, but I like to add a zip pocket. So with the other lining piece, I've got a piece of fabric that I've cut out that's 10 inches across, 12 inches down. It's a bit bigger than I probably need, but I just like to make sure I've got a big enough piece. And the other piece I've done is I've used the vinyl from the outside, and that measures 8 inches along and 1.5 inches high. And what I did was I measured 1/2 inch up and 1/2 inch in and drew a line. Did the same on the other side, then boxed it off and basically cut that out. So the piece you cut out is 1/2 inch by 7 inches, yeah. So you end up with a rectangle like that. Now you want to get your other piece of lining, and again I'm going to do it 2 inches from the top, and I'm going to get my trusty double-sided tape, and put it on the outer edge at the top Just realised I am in shot, yes. I've done a wider angle today so that hopefully I'm getting everything in where I should. And then a piece of double-sided tape at the bottom. Move the plastic. And as I said, this is 8 inches along, this is 16 inches. So at the 4-inch mark, so 2 inches from the top and 4 inches in, I'm placing my zipper facing. There we are. And I'm going to now stitch the outer edges and I'll come back. So there we have, I've top stitched all the way around the outside, and now what I want to do is cut out this fabric that's in the middle. So you go quite close, probably about 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters from the edge. Don't go too close because you're in danger of cutting the stitching, which you certainly don't want to do. So as you can see, I've cut around there, and I need to get my zip, which I forgot to get out, so I'm going to pause the video and get the zip. Okay, so I've got my zip and I've put some double-sided tape on each side of either side of the hole that we've made, and I shall just remove the plastic backing. And then what I like to do is lay the zip down face up with the zipper pull going along the teeth, and then I very carefully line it up neatly like so. And then if I'm unhappy with any gaps, I think this is a bit sticking out a bit too far, that's it. So I've stuck it down, I've stuck the lining to the zipper, and now what we need to do is turn over get the zip pocket piece, and then along the bottom edge of the stitching that I did earlier. Just went a bit wonky there. So where we've stitched the rectangle box, stitching the outer rectangle, just put some double-sided tape and then remove the plastic film, and lining it up centrally, as centrally as you can. I mean, if you want to measure you can, but I don't. You want the fabric, the lining, pocket lining, face down and along the edge so that you're sticking it to the double-sided tape like so. And then we flip over. Now if you want to just pin this to keep that there, you can, but what we're going to do now is literally just stitch from that end along there to the other end and stop. So I've stitched along the bottom edge only, and then we want to turn over again, and this time I'm going to put my double-sided tape along the top, just inside the rectangular box of stitching that we did earlier. And take off the tape again. And this time we're going to move the pocket up and along. And this time, if you want to sort of just pin there to keep that pocket in place to stop it flipping up, you can. And this time we're going to stitch up the side, along the top and down the side. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around, and now what we need to do is to sew the sides of the pocket to seal it. So there we have it, that's the zip pocket finished, and open it up, see inside it's all sealed and complete. So that's the two lining pieces completed. If you like to add a label, now's the time to do it. I add my label, Bags of Love by Diane. So again, I measure everything, and all I want to do is get the centre of the lining, which again is 16 inches, and I want to get my double-sided tape and just snip a couple of small pieces off. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog whimpering. He likes to just sit and whimper. There's nothing wrong with him. He's a Staffy cross, and apparently Staffies like to whine. He's quite old and he has spent his life whining. Even when you're stroking him and cuddling him, he still makes little whining noises. So we just tend to ignore him because there's nothing wrong with him. I'm not being cruel. But at the moment he's a bit upset because I am ignoring him. Okay, so removing the plastic off the back of the label, all I do is fold it in half, and then I want to find the centre point, which is 8 inches. And I lay that down where I want it to be. And I will now go to my machine and just stitch that down either side. Now we have the two lining pieces finished and prepared with the pockets. It's time to add the top facing, interior facing. So what we need to do is right sides together, sorry. Lay them right sides together along the top. And just clip them together. And that one done. And now we do all the way down with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've sewn them together, and now we open it up, make sure that the seam is facing down, and we need to top stitch along the top on this side of the fabric. Now, the pattern does say to do 2 rows. I'm not going to. I only ever do 1. But if you want to follow the pattern and do 2, that's entirely up to you. I should come back when I've top stitched. Okay, I've done the top stitching, and you know what? I thought, what the heck? Whilst I was stitching the first row, I decided I would stitch the second row. There could be a reason for it, but I don't normally do 2 rows, and so I thought I'd change it up and do them. And they look quite nice. So that's the 2 rows of top stitching. I don't know if you can see them or not. I hope you can. I think, I was thinking whilst I was doing it, this is quite heavy, strong vinyl, and this is quite delicate cotton. And I just felt that by doing the 2 rows of top stitching, it would help sort of keep the cotton with the vinyl, and it would, you know, help it look good and nice and neat and tidy. So that's the top stitching done. And now it's time to install the magnetic snap. I had to have a look then to see where the magnetic snap's going to go. Now they do say that fold the top piece in half across to get the centre point. I don't want to do that because it's vinyl and it will crease and might be difficult to get out. So I'm just measuring the centre point. It's 16 inches across, so it's 8 inches, and it's 1.5 inches down from the top. And then we need to get the washer. I think you can see this. I'm just going to zoom in for you. I hope the camera's staying in focus. Okay, so I've marked the centre point there. And then we get the washer, put the central hole over so that the dot is in the middle, and mark the lines either side. I know many of you will have installed magnetic snaps, so you know how to do it, but there may be some of you that don't, so this is how you install them. So you've got the lines there, and I use my craft knife to get the exact mark that I want, the exact cut that I want, and keeping my fingers away. I don't like to go too mad and sort of stab too fiercely, because I don't want to end up putting a massive cut through. So, I don't think it really matters which one you put in, actually, whether it's the male or the female part, so I'm just going to go with the one I had first. And then some people spread them out, some people push them in. I like to push them in because if you push them out, they sort of, you can feel them through the fabric there and there, especially if you use cotton, which I don't really like, so I choose to do them inwards, but it's personal preference. And then I get my offcut of Peltex, and as before, like I did with the handmade label, I add glue, quite a liberal amount, and stick that over, and I just push it down for a few moments just to help it stick initially. And then we want to do the same with the other side. And you want to do 8 inches in again. Sorry, I don't think that was in shot, was it? Beg your pardon. And then, as before, mark the 2 lines. Now, some people use seam rippers. You just stick your seam rippers. In fact, I'll do that to show it to you. You get your seam ripper, go in at the top, and gently cut through. I think this one's got a bit blunt in its age. I've had this one quite a long time. I've got an extra spare head. I need to change it up. Oh, I had gone through, I didn't realise. I didn't feel it was cutting. So again, poke it down. Go along. And then get the other part of the snap. I did say earlier on, but I'm using an 18mm thin snap. I like using thin. I don't like those chunky magnetic snaps. And then I always use scissors because it just gives it a really definite fold. And again, glue. So that's that prepared. I'm going to have to go off now for a while whilst this dries and come back in a little bit to continue. Okay, so they've dried enough for me to continue. What I've done is I've clipped the sides together and the bottom. I can zoom out again now. And what I've done is I've made sure that I've lined up the pieces together like that so that they're exactly in the same place, so you're not going to have wonky seams. So you want to sew down both sides, and you only want to sew a little bit along the bottom, leaving a 7 or 8 inch gap. To be honest with you, the bigger the gap, the better, because the easier it is for turning. So I definitely leave as wide a gap as I can. Some people like to leave gaps at the side and turn their bags that way. If you want to do that, you can. But it's actually not going to be a very big hole at the side. I think you'll get a wider hole at the bottom. So I'm definitely doing one at the bottom. So they don't say in the pattern, but what you can do is start by doing the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And if you want to just go out to 1/2 inch, so just literally 1/8 of an inch wider. If you want to go out to 1/2 inch and stitch 1/2 inch each side, but you've got to start the top with 3/8 of an inch so it matches with the outer, and that way you'll have a slightly smaller lining which will fit a bit more neater into the bag. You don't have to do it, but I tend to do that so that it does look neater. So I'm going to stitch both the sides and part of the bottom and come back. Right, so we've sewn down the edges and just a little bit into the bottom. I've left quite a good gap of 9 inches and I'm proud of it. I'm a wimp for turning, and I expect, like a lot of you ladies, have arthritis in the hands, so it can be very painful turning. So I just help myself by leaving as big a gap as I dare. So now we want to do as we did for the outer, by bringing the seams together and making sure that the seams match up, and opening the seams. I just use a few clips to put that in place. Do the same on the other side. And if you want to check that you've got the seams aligned, you can open the inside up and take a peek, which, oh goodness me, as you can see, I think I have my seams lined up. So now, using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance again, we're going to stitch across to close the ends off. There we have it. It's finished off. And now for the exciting part, time to put the bag together. So I always like to have my zip pockets with the label at the back of the bag. So I want to make sure that the front of the bag is the right way round. And we put the outer bag inside the lining with the fabrics right side together. And then get lots of clips. And the first thing you want to do is line up the seams. They are the most important things that are lined up. You open up the seams so that they're reducing the bulk, and I like to clip either side just to keep them in place, and do both ends to start with, because if you start clipping at the top, sorry, do you know, I've just realised I'm not getting that in. I do apologise. Oh dear, here I go again. Okay, I just clip them in with the seam allowance open. And then rather than clip all the way along, I find that I'm not matching this end. I make sure that both ends are matching with the seams. And I clip either side. And now we can go around and clip however many clips we want to, or even if you don't want to clip, you don't have to. If you're confident and you don't feel you need to, then don't. But if you are a fairly inexperienced sewer, then I do suggest you use clips for accuracy. So it all fits nice and neatly. There's no bagginess or anything. And now we're going to sew around the top edge.